The end of President Trump's friendship with Elon Musk was never really a question of if, but when. And now we know the answer, except maybe we don't. For all we know, they could be back together before summer. Meanwhile, in the real world, Russia's war against Ukraine grows more dire, Iran gets closer to nuclear breakout, Israel slides further toward crisis, and at home, the rule of law is in real danger. Next.
This is Washington Week with The Atlantic. Corporate funding provided by Consumer Cellular. Additional funding is provided by Koo and Patricia Ewan through the Ewan Foundation, committed to bridging cultural differences in our communities. Sandra and Carl DeLay Magnuson, Rose Herschel and Andy Shreves, Robert and Susan Rosenbaum, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. Once again, from the David M. Rubenstein studio at WETA in Washington, Editor-in-Chief of The Atlantic and moderator, Jeffrey Goldberg.
Good evening and welcome to Washington Week. I want everyone to know that I take the Trump-Musk breakup drama seriously, in part because Donald Trump gave his former best friend Elon Musk access to enormous amounts of secret government data, and there's no predicting what Musk could do with it. But the world at large is in a state of seemingly permanent tumult, and so it's a good time for a general checkup. My guest tonight is Thomas Friedman, a three-time Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and foreign affairs columnist for the New York Times. Tom, thanks for coming in for our seemingly annual checkup. I want to ask you about this Elon Musk business, and maybe we can put it into some serious context. Before we jump to that, I want to read something that my colleague Charlie Warzel, writing in The Atlantic this morning, had to say. The sun rises every morning, spring turns to summer, water is wet. Donald Trump and Elon Musk's relationship has ended with a post about Jeffrey Epstein. And then, of course, he tweeted, these guys really do escalate quickly. Musk tweeted, time to drop the really big bomb. Real Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day, DJT. So put this into some kind of context that makes sense for ordinary people. What is going on here?
Well, I confess, Jeff, on the way over, I thought you'd ask me about this. And the first thing that popped into my mind was the Iran-Iraq war. What did we say about the Iran-Iraq war? If only both sides could lose. Okay,
right.
So
right.
There's no hero in this story. What it really is the latest manifestation to me of the central truth of the Trump 2 administration. Trump 1 was surrounded by buffers. Trump 2 was surrounded by amplifiers. And therefore, stuff that used to begin at the Mar-a-Lago bar and then get muffled in the Oval Office now goes from the Mar-a-Lago bar right to the Oval Office, right to you and me. And whether it's what he feels about, Musk or his role, he wants him in the government. But to me, the whole Musk phenomenon is part of a much deeper and more disturbing phenomenon from an American citizen point of view, which is nothing here is modeled, nothing here is stress tested, everything is a riff. The country is being run like the Trump organization today, not like the United States of America. And so as a result of that, Jeff, there's no second order thinking, all right? What's second order thinking? I'm gonna put on tariffs, okay? 10% across the board, including Canada and Mexico, even though I'm violating an agreement I signed with them when I was president last time. Second order thinking is, oh my God, you mean the Ford F-150, only 1/3 of its parts are made in America? And the other 2/3 now are going to be tariffed? I will bet any amount of money. No one told him that. And that's true now of everything. And so, for the first trimester of this administration, you think the first 3 months, all of this was kind of entertaining. But now he's running up against a wall. It turns out he can't solve the Russia-Ukraine war overnight. It turns out tariff wars aren't easy to win. It turns out, Musk is not going to, do the revolution in the government for him.
Turns out courts sometimes don't like what you do.
Exactly. And so I think the second, 3 months are going to get very interesting as he runs into this reality. And I don't know where it's going to go, but it leaves me disquiet.
That's interesting. I was thinking, as you were saying this, I was thinking about John Kelly, General John Kelly, being, and along with General Mattis and others, being those buffers
right.
or filters. There's literally no one in the White House or in the whole system who does anything but amplify. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I just
The
don't.
Treasury Secretary?
I just don't see it. You know, I mean, yeah, you hear these stories that the Treasury Secretary had to wait, you know, for one of the other, you know, economic guys, Peter Navarro, to be out of the room for him to come in to try to change the tariffs. This is crazy stuff. Now, I happen to be in China twice in the last 6 months. I've watched a lot of this from China, actually. And when you see it from China, I mean, they say a couple of things. One is, you know, we are never going to put our president in a situation like Zelensky in the Oval Office where he can be embarrassed, number one. The second thing they say, Jeff, is that this isn't cute. We just saw Donald Trump tear up a trade agreement that Donald Trump made with America's two closest neighbors and allies, Canada and Mexico. What is the value, therefore, of a trade agreement with him now? And, you know, the Chinese, these are, you like them or hate them, these are serious people, you know.
And they are not spontaneous.
No, exactly. So when Trump put the 44% tariff on them, they said, you talking to me? You talking to me? Do you realize that we control 90% of the rare earths that make the magnets that go in every car you make? Do you realize that? Which he didn't, which is why Ford and GM and Stellantis had to announce this week, we may actually have to curb some production because we're running out of Chinese magnets.
Right. Stay with this Musk question for a minute, and this issue of Musk as a radical isotope in a kind of way. He's been given access to government secrets across the board in order to cut government agencies through the Doge operation. That seems like an operational security nightmare if he goes rogue. Surprising to you? I mean, where does this relationship go? Can they bring it back from the brink? Is there anybody who's trying to bring it back from the brink, or is this just more chaos?
Well, you know, I think the best way to understand this is not with the analogy of political science, but World Wrestling Federation.
Right.
And those in World Wrestling Federation, there are breakups and comeback and new teams and whatnot. I put this all in the area of entertainment. You know, not in something serious. We're dealing with two extremely unstable characters. But what really is more important is, what's the wider world audience saying? What's the wider world audience saying? They're saying, you know, for all of our lifetime, Jeff, sort of post-war America, if I had an extra dollar and I'm a foreigner, I'm going to put it in America. If I have an extra, you know, brain power and a brainy person, I'm going to study in America. And if I have a little extra dollop of trust, I'm going to trust America.
Right.
Now, you take all three of those things away, and you end up with a very different relationship between America and the world.
Okay, so I have to ask you, and by the way, it's interesting, right? Miami is Miami because it's a safe place for people's money. Harvard is, or was Harvard, because people want to come from around the world, and so on. And the United Nations is headquartered in New York. You know. I mean, everybody for a reason. Right. We wrote the rules of the road for the post-war international order. So the question is, you're an ally or an adversary, and you're looking at this clown show. By the way, on the weekend that marks the 81st anniversary of D-Day. Noting, just for the record, you put yourselves in the shoes of an ally and adversary. Are you thinking that this is a midlife crisis America's having, a nervous breakdown, or is this some kind of weird terminal illness?
You know, I don't know which. All I know is I'm completely disoriented if I'm an ally, and I'm completely disoriented if I'm the foreign affairs columnist for the New York Times, because I've never covered this world. And, you know, our friend, you know, Fried Zakaria wrote a book 15 years ago or so called The Post-American World. And Fried's book was really about a change in relative power. Right. You know, between that, there'll be the rise of Brazil and India and other countries. Right. So we won't have as much power as we had before. What really, if I were writing a book today, Jeff, it'd be called The Post-America World. Okay, well, that's what I'm really worried about, because America stood for some things. It stood for universal values. It stood for stability. It stood for the rule of law. It was a loyal ally. We were always against the dictator versus the people seeking freedom. What really worries me, that at the end of my, you know, career, basically, I'm dealing with the post-America world, the America I grew up and loved and was devoted to, and as someone who lived abroad like you have, know how important that America is to the whole world. American optimism and stability makes the world go round. You take us out of the equation, it's not like anybody else comes in. I'm sorry. You have a no superpower world.
Right.
You know.
Right. But come back to this. Do you think that this instability that we're experiencing, emotional, political, all the instabilities that we're experiencing, could it be temporary? Or can we not come back reputationally to start?
Well, the thing I'm worried about most is that, and it may seem like a simple thing, but Donald Trump came in and he told all the Democrats on the board of the Kennedy Center, "You're gone." Now, traditionally, every president sort of left the other party's people there, and then he put in his people. So when you enter into a kind of zero-sum politics now in America, when you fire the head of the NASA after you appointed him because he made a tiny donation to a Democrat, you're into a kind of politics that I grew up with in the Middle East. What was that? Rule or die. Okay, you're either in power or you're down. It's zero sum. Okay,
I'm on top or I'm in a dungeon.
And so there's a book about African dictators called "It's Our Turn to Eat." And we're just going to eat everything. So then, now, if you're a Democrat, and guess what? We do have, God willing, if we still have elections, rotations in power, do they come in now and treat all the Republicans in these traditional bipartisan fora, the same way? And if that happens, we're really off to the races. Then the whole thing just starts to disintegrate.
What country does that remind you of, that new vision?
I mean, so many dictatorships just in general that I've covered over the years. That's what you come in, you wipe out all the other guy's people. Well, that's not how we do things in this country.
Right. Well, let's talk about a country that's not democratic for a second. I want you to watch this. It's the latest analysis by President Trump of the current state of play in Russia's war against Ukraine, and he's talking about Putin here.
Mm-hmm.
He got hit. He's been doing hitting, so I understand it, but he got hit hard, and I don't think he's playing games. I said, President, maybe you're going to have to keep fighting and suffering a lot because both sides are suffering before you pull them apart, before they're able to be pulled apart. But it's a pretty known analogy. You have two kids, they fight. Sometimes you let them fight for a little while. You see it in hockey, you see it in sports.
Not Henry Kissinger, but he's trying to impose his own realpolitik understanding. What is he misunderstanding from your perspective?
Jeff, do you know how flat out crazy that is? I mean, that's like saying, well, Hitler and Poland, they fight, they come back, you know what I mean? Trump came in and said, I can end this war, all right? There's one way to end this war. You say to Vladimir Putin, if you don't stop the war, and we agree to the ceasefire terms I dictate, we are bringing Ukraine into NATO in 30 days. Which part of that sentence don't you understand? Do you want to mess with me? Test me. That's how you end this war. What you just heard of Donald Trump, that sounded like a commentator on Fox TV. He's not the commentator. He's president of the United States. Well, he hit him and he hit them. This guy invaded a country. He's basically tried to rape a country. That's what Putin did, okay? And the Ukrainians, with incredible bravery, stood up and defended basically the Western alliance on something that's very important, because if Ukraine were able to join the European Union, Jeff, then you have a Europe that's really whole and free. That's actually a big deal for Europe and for us. Right. And this guy's talking about it like it's some schoolyard fight and they're morally equal. It's nuts and it's disgusting.
Right. Is there any issue, from a foreign affairs columnist perspective, is there any issue in which Trump is not transactional? Have you ever seen a sign of what we would think of as, in a bipartisan way, American idealism?
Out of Trump?
Yeah.
None comes to mind. What I would say, and where I thought you might be going, is some things are also true even if Donald Trump believes them. And by the way, his transactionalism sometimes can also be an advantage. For instance, I'm glad he's sitting down with the Iranians. Let's see what you got. I'm glad he told the Syrian president, I'm going to give you a reputation to live up to. I didn't mind him talking directly to Hamas, if I can get the hostages out. So there is that transactional side of him that I think could be an advantage. But it's not grounded in any moral, framework of what we stand for as a country and what we've always stood for If it's just a kind of free-floating thing, it becomes very, very dangerous.
Yeah. In his non-sophisticated analysis of the current state of play in Russia and Ukraine, he didn't really talk about the drone attack that Ukraine launched on Russian aerial assets deep inside Russia. Does that change this war?
Jeff, I'd say two things, and again, it's part of the craziness of this moment. Let's start at 30,000 feet and then come down to the battlefield. At 30,000 feet, you and I are having this discussion on the eve of the greatest technological revolution in human history. We are very close to birthing a new species, not a new machine, a new artificially intelligent species. And it's going to be with us sometime while Trump is president. It is not going to change one thing, it's going to change everything. We are not talking about that at all. So that's, I would say, number one. Under that technological revolution, and one of the things they say about AI, it'll actually be mankind's last invention. Because once we invent that, it will invent everything else. That's going to be a big deal. Under that, though, we're seeing a revolution in military affairs. Basically, Ukraine spent $20,000 to knock out, $20 million planes. $20,000, that was probably because they couldn't get Costco online, from Kiev, and they had to buy them from Amazon.
Right.
So the asymmetric warfare world that we're entering now, wow. I mean, if you're the U.S. Navy and you're sitting with 12 aircraft carriers and you just recovered from the fact that the Houthis, you lost an F-A Hornet because you had to swerve your aircraft carrier and the plane fell off the back because you were getting out of the way of
not a sterling moment in naval history.
Because you're avoiding a Houthi missile, a bunch of guys in flip-flops, basically, in a country that's water-starved. The asymmetry we're going to be dealing with right now, I think these events are really disturbing and going to require a huge revolution in how we think about military affairs.
As I'm listening to you about AI, AGI, and drone warfare, I'm just thinking that the preoccupation this weekend in America is the emotionally febrile relationship between this ketamine-taking billionaire and our reality TV star president, and it's like there's something that's so deeply unserious about our moment.
Yeah, and I think it's been true of our country that basically everything became politics. Yeah. And so we don't have just ESPN now, we have PSPN, sort of politics sports network.
Right.
And it's a testament to the underlying strength of our country, Jeff, that our economy goes on, we still invent amazing stuff, and we think we can afford this. And you know what, Jeff, we can't afford it until we can't.
Right. Let me pivot finally toward the Middle East and ask you this. And I've read your recent columns on this subject. You're a severe critic of Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, and the way he's conducted this war.
And of Hamas, which is...
And I want to get there. Yeah. But what I don't understand from reading you is this. So Hamas and its allies seek the annihilation of Israel. They state that. It's not a secret.
Yeah.
How does Israel end the war without totally defeating Hamas? In other words, is it? I understand the criticisms, but how do they coexist with a neighbor who won't allow coexistence?
They don't. I'm all for Israel completely defeating Hamas militarily. What I am not for are the three alternative choices that Israel had after that defeat that Netanyahu refuses to make. One choice is we defeat them and we, Israel, the Jewish state, occupy Gaza forever. That will be the moral and economic end of Israel. Another choice is we just leave and we turn it into Mogadishu. That will also be terrible for Israel. The third choice, the one I favor, is you create an Arab international peacekeeping force in partnership with the Palestinian Authority, and over time you build an alternative to Hamas. What my criticism of Netanyahu is not fighting Hamas, not even crushing Hamas. It's not creating any alternative Palestinian structure and therefore leaving the Jewish people with the choice, Jeff, of permanently occupying Gaza or having Mogadishu there. And permanently occupying Gaza, we know what that's going to do? That's going to create a world where your grandchildren and mine are going to grow up in a world where they will learn what it is to be Jewish in a world where the Jewish state is a pariah. And that is a disaster, and that's what I'm fighting.
But there is a double standard, obviously, in the world when it comes to judging Israel's behavior. But I guess you're just saying that you have to live with that.
That's the world as it is.
That's the world as it is. You quoted Ehud Olmert, the former prime minister of Israel, a center-right prime minister, saying that Israel is committing war crimes, and this is why he needs the war to start. Do you agree that Israel is committing war crimes?
You know, I have not entered into that whole linguistic fight because my position has been from the very beginning, I'm here to do one thing, figure out how to end this thing. You know, I'm old, Jeff, 71. I covered the Hama massacre, Sabra and Shatila, the American embassy bombing. I've covered all of them, okay? And I've said to myself, I'm not going to be the scorekeeper of this. I'm focused on one thing, not who did the worst thing to because they all do terrible things at different times. I want to figure out how to end it. And that's where I put all my energy from the very, very beginning. And if you've read my stuff on Hamas, it's the same thing. What is Hamas's position today? Very simple. We want a ceasefire, and we want Israel out of Gaza. Oh, really? What did you have on October 6th before this war started? That's what you had. So you fought this whole war. You allowed 40, 50,000 of your people to be killed to get you back to where you started? Shame on you. But I can't, control them. I can't figure them out. All I know, I do believe that if we want to see a Jewish and democratic Israel, that's what I do care about. Palestinians will have to figure that out. You've got to find a way to get out of Gaza in a way that will create also in partnership with a different Palestinian authority.
Let me ask you one last question, because you're an expert on this for many decades, several decades. Many sounds too dire. What does Netanyahu not understand about American politics and about American Jewish politics?
Well, I think Netanyahu is shocked by what's going on here because Netanyahu always could go around any American president. And now he can't because he's looking for the Republican base. He's pulling that lever. And it comes off.
Kind of looks like a little bit of a sucker, thinking that Joe Biden was bad for Israel.
Yeah, exactly. It turns out there are other worse things.
Right. And what about, what doesn't he understand about American Jews?
I think what he doesn't understand about American Jews is that, they're ready to be with him. They want Israel that's successful, democratic. They are really important to Israel standing in America. And you abandon them for evangelical Christians, you'll regret that one day.
Right. Well, it's enormously complicated, as is Russia, Ukraine, as is everything. And thank you for coming on and not talking about Elon Musk only, because I'm a little tired.
Iran, Iraqi war, okay?
Iran, Iraqi war.
Saddam and Ayatollah Khomeini.
We're going to have to leave it there. But I want to thank Tom for joining me, and thank you at home for watching us. For more on the Trump-Musk fallout, be sure to check out Charlie Warzel's latest article at theatlantic.com. I'm Jeffrey Goldberg. Good night from Washington.
Corporate funding for Washington Week with The Atlantic is provided by...
In 1995, two friends set out to make wireless coverage accessible to all. With no long-term contracts, nationwide coverage, and 100% U.S.-based customer support. Consumer Cellular. Freedom calls.
Additional funding is provided by Koo and Patricia Ewan for the Ewan Foundation, committed to bridging cultural differences in our communities. Sandra and Carl DeLay Magnuson, Rose Herschel and Andy Shreves, Robert and Susan Rosenbaum, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.